The Boeing 737 is among the most popular families of commercial aircraft ever produced. On your travels or in photographs, you may or may not have noticed that this popular aircraft's engines have a certain visual quirk to their design. Specifically, the engine casing's bottom flattens out, rather than continuing around a perfect circular shape. What's the reason for this oddity? Let's first examine the 737's initial design principle. Originally, the aircraft was built for airports in a different age, first flying in the late 1960s. This was a time when few airports had stair cars and even fewer had jet bridges. Back then, aircraft needed doors, especially cargo doors, that an operator or cargo handler could climb into without specialized equipment. With that in mind, Boeing designed early 737 variants, such as the Dash 100 and Dash 200, to operate as low to the ground as possible. Compared to today's aircraft, its belly almost seemed to scrape along the surface of the runway. However, as engine technology improved, engineers discovered that the more air an engine could suck in, the more efficient its operation would be. For an increased air intake, engines need larger turbines powered by larger fans, thus requiring larger casings. 20 years after the 737, Airbus built the rival A320 family, but this airframe had bigger engines in mind. Early generations of 737s were too low to the ground to accommodate larger engines. Boeing could have moved the engines to a different area of the plane, redesigning it like its Trijet 727. However, this would have significantly changed its aerodynamic profile, forcing pilot recertification and retraining. As such, Boeing was out of luck and faced an expensive redesign of the 737. However, engineers looking at the aircraft realized that the engine's casing, rather than the size of the power plants as a whole, was the problem. As such, they needed to find a shape that was not purely circular to ensure sufficient ground clearance for larger engines. Subsequently, the engines on future 737s were flattened along the bottom. This allowed them to contain a larger fan and turbine without compromising on ground clearance. The solution was not perfect, as it did have certain aerodynamic penalties, causing more drag than a round engine. However, the increased amount of air entering the engine caused the bypass ratio to expand so much that it made any drawbacks negligible. The Boeing 737 Classic series, Dash 300, Dash 400 and Dash 500 variants entered service in 1984 and were the first examples to feature CFM56 engines. These are well known for their non-circular hamster pouch design. The newer aircraft had similar enough aerodynamics that its pilots did not have to retrain nor be recertified. Instead, the redesigned engine casings meant that pilots could work interchangeably between older and newer 737s at the time. The flat bottom is a visually conspicuous design feature that can certainly look a little odd at first glance. However, it ultimately helped the 737 advance towards the commercially successful iterations we're familiar with today. The 737 Next Gen series in particular was wildly popular with airlines around the world. Did you notice the flat bottom of 737 engines? Let us know in the comments. In addition to our daily YouTube videos, Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles and a podcast every week. If you're looking for the latest aviation news and insights, visit simpleflying.com. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe before you go.